So cool. How many are not from Colorado?
Rise of the humans.
Creativity, strategic thinking, problem solving.
Well, thanks everyone for being here. Good to be talking about productivity and why is it so important to organizations and how being able to use it to run and measure performance more accurately than how it's currently being done today. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about really just how do we measure true performance, and a lot from how we're doing it from Salesforce through the App Exchange. So a bit about me. So 1 second. Originally from a RevOps background. I spent 20 plus years in RevOps. I always say that's why I don't have much hair and the rest is grey. It's probably, I know for any RevOps leader, one of the hardest jobs I've ever done. I don't know why I stayed in it for so long. I don't know how I landed up in RevOps. I'm still trying to figure out that path. But anyway, but I did. It's been a fascinating journey as technology's improved and so on. And I got to work for some great companies looking after RevOps for them. And that's when I started to get into these questions, right? How do we start to actually measure true sales performance without looking at quota attainment? That was the biggest thing for me. Is I always, everyone was quota attainment, and I always used to ask the question, well, how were the quotas set? Because my team would set the quotas, and there'd always be a sales VP that would then renegotiate the quotas, and now we had inconsistency on how the quotas were done across the regions, and it was very hard to then start comparing apples with apples and so forth. So, that's sort of the second point, right? You can't really tell who's doing well or not if we're not able to actually accurately measure performance. And that just started to get me on this path about, well, how do we get to a better metric to measure performance? So I was just going to ask anyone in the room, how are you currently measuring sales performance in your organizations? If you are involved in it, or do you know?
Usually like the lead conversion.
Okay, so lead conversion.
And then eventually look at the revenue. That's like the main metric.
Yeah. And it all starts with the leads, right? So what are the leads convert at? When it gets into pipeline, qualification, discovery, what are those conversion rates? And then you're going to land up with close one business, which is effectively productivity, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But absolutely, it starts with the leads. Anyone else? Quiet. Okay. Okay, good. Well, so I'm going to dig into Salesforce data, and I'm going to come back to the whole lead discussion, because the demand funnel and how that then feeds into your pipeline tracking and your close one business, it all needs to be linked together in the future, which it will be. So I'm sure it does sound vaguely familiar. We're going to have a sales contest this month. The winners get to enter next month's contest, and I'll come back to that at the end. Okay, so where not to start, and I alluded to this a bit earlier. Okay, quotas and quota attainment are great. You need them. You have to have them because you need to drive behaviors. And to do that, you need a comp plan. And the comp plan has levers that you pull. And they are very important to do that. But when we start to look at them to measure sales performance, it's a bit more risky. And that's because there's so many variables to set in a quota. There's so many things that happen on when you set quotas. It's such a complex. What's the over-assignment rules? What are we going to do for the new business quotas versus the renewal quotas versus the upsell quotas? We've got a team in the US on the East Coast that it just needs to have different quotas to the West Coast. Like, why? Well, no, it's just the way it is. It's just like all this stuff comes up on how you set up quotas. So that's why I've just struggled with it for too many years. And then the best part is then we use those quotas and then attainment to build capacity plans. And then we wonder why our sales organizations, it's better now, but why there were just too many salespeople in some of the teams, or not enough people in the wrong verticals and so forth, because we're using these quotas to actually build and decide how many salespeople we hire. And it just that inconsistency then lands to more inconsistent capacity plans. So that's pretty much what you're reading there. The other thing is they change frequently. I don't know if is anyone in this room involved in setting quotas for sales teams? Not so much. Okay, you're lucky. One person. I'm sorry. Exactly. It's really tough, but they change. It's amazing. You get your comp plans out, you get your quotas out, and then literally the next month, I need to make this change, I need to make this change. By the end of 4 or 5 months into the year, you've made probably about 10 changes and adjustments to the quotas. So let's just move along. I think I've spoken enough about it. Okay, so distraction data objects. So a lot of the time you'll see sales organizations are looking a lot at event, task, and activity data. I hear it all the time. Let's look at the activity data of what's happening, because that's going to tell us if the sales teams are going to be, hit their numbers or not. And yes, activity data is very important to look at. But to start to look at that to measure sales performance, it's a bit dangerous. Because again, there's so many things that can happen with activity data on why did the sales rep A send 50 emails yesterday, but the day before he sent 80. There could be a good reason for it. Well, we had 2 all hands that the business held, and they were off they weren't working for 2 hours. There's just so many variables again to it. Forecast data. Forecast and pipeline is hard. That's why there's a lot of forecasting technologies out there. They do a very great job, but they have their purpose, and that's why you're using forecasting technologies to do it. We've spoken about quota methodologies. I won't go back there. I can if you want. But, I think you know my thoughts on it. Okay, why are there distractions? So many, so they're just again, many influences to why activity data changes across organizations. Pipeline is just incomplete. I got to tell you, I feel now, being a RevOps leader where we spend so much time on training sales teams on making sure that the pipeline data is accurate. I get onto a forecast call with actually I've got a board member who runs our go-to-market every week, and I don't update the pipeline sometimes. So I really do feel for salespeople, because it's just that time and effort, and I've got to get better at it, especially with our small sales team. But it's just incomplete, and there's just a lot that needs to be done. And then also just back to this quotas, just so everyone knows, 54% of salespeople hit quotas. So how can we be using sales quotas as a measure of what the performances of sales organizations are, if only half of the people are hitting their quotas? Again, it's inconsistent. It's not stable. Okay, so productivity. Why this is important. So what productivity is that it's the yield per rep per unit of time, which is how much revenue did a salesperson generate over a period of time on average. So that's what we're going to talk about. So basically, it's foundational, and why I love it so much is it creates a stable metric, right? If you know what the average productivity is of a salesperson, we're not looking at quota attainment, we're not looking at activities. We're just going to look, what did the salesperson produce, and what did they do on average? Also, this data lives in Salesforce. One of the things that is always right in Salesforce, generally, well, more often than not, is close one business. Like if one thing a salesperson is always going to make sure is that close one opportunity is correctly filled out, because the commissions get paid off that, and the invoicing gets done off it. So businesses are way more, spend a lot more time making sure that data is up to date. It can be applied across multiple dimensions. Because it's productivity data, what's the average of the sales team? Okay, great. Well, what's the average productivity of the new business team? What's the average productivity of the renewal team? Now I've got consistency on how I can measure that. Is it rising? Is it going up, or is it going down? One of the most amazing things about productivity, when you look at it in most organizations, is productivity tends to track down over time. And why? You go look at headcount, and you'll see headcounts going up because we add in more people. And the balance, what needs to be found is that how do you make sure that you maintain productivity and get it to go up, or even slightly up, by making sure you hire the salespeople at the right time. But the thing is, if you don't have the data, it's very difficult to be able to do that. I'm going to come back to why this is hard to actually calculate productivity and why a lot of businesses aren't doing it. It can be trended. Productivity is a very good gauge of where you're going to go in the future, because at the end of the day, it's an average. I've got so many salespeople, I've got so much revenue. One by the other is average productivity. Well, if I've got 50 salespeople, that average gets harder to move. If I've got 10 salespeople, okay, a bit easier to move. If I've got 100 salespeople, like something fundamentally has to happen in that business for that to shift, which means it becomes quite predictable. So once you've got productivity, you can start to predict things, or at least use it as another data point to validate forecasts. it really is a primary metric that all RevOps and enablement teams should be using. I just, in my career, when I figured out this productivity stuff as a metric, it was more so at Citrix, really. Aruba Networks a bit as well. But at Citrix, we managed the sales team purely by productivity. Like everything we did was, we ran the data. I had 2 analysts full-time running productivity data. Every Thursday. On Friday morning, we'd get into the markets and go-to-market session, look at the lead volumes, look at the demand funnel, make the adjustments over the weekend, and see what happens. Thursday night, productivity data comes out, go-to-market meeting on Friday with marketing, same repeat. And that's how we ran the sales teams. Yes, we had quotas. Yes, we had comp plans to drive the behaviors. But that's the cadence we got to. And we built that SaaS business. We grew it from 400 million to 800 million in 4 years. Just to tell you another story, just to end that, because I think it's quite interesting to show you what can go wrong when you don't do it. We then spun that business off from Citrix and merged with a company called LogMeIn. We took all our productivity data to LogMeIn. This is now an even bigger company now. We were 800 million. We went to 1.1 billion. And the LogMeIn team said, we're not going to look at the productivity data. When we did that, that business was worth 5.5 billion when those companies came together. And that was the market value on the stock exchange. LogMeIn had to delist 2 years ago, and they got picked up for 1.5 billion. Like the business crashed and fell apart. I'm not saying it's all to do with productivity, but it is a very important leading a metric to be how you manage a sales organization, especially when you're at scale like that. And it was all ignored. There's a lot of other decisions that were made that also caused that. There were too many acquisitions and other things. Other things, when you're acquiring companies, why wouldn't you want to look at what the productivity is of that sales team that you're acquiring? It's very important data, and it's hard. When you go ask most companies, what's the sales productivity of your team, they're probably going to say, I don't really know. But we should know. We should all know if we want to build revenue-efficient companies. Okay, now the cool thing that I love about Salesforce, this is why when we started later, we spent so much time on this, getting onto the App Exchange. This data all exists in Salesforce. The user object, opportunity object, the account object. Is there any Salesforce admins or solution architects here? Excellent. Okay. so you know these objects well. And this is, so when you're looking to calculate the productivity, we're looking at user objects because we need to know who the salespeople are. Generally, it would be really nice if you guys had the start dates in there as well. It's not always there, but look, you need to give Salesforce access so we know that date happens, or the date that they first closed their one opportunity. Role assignments, where they're assigned. Are they in the new business team, the renewal team? Where are they? That helps as well. And you can build that out a bit, just a few elements to tag who that salesperson is. That's one way to do it. The opportunity object, close one business. We know that that's the cleanest opportunity data. But what's important in the opportunity layouts is you capture in things like who is the territory, or what was the territory, what was the segment that they were selling into, the type of business, is it new business, renewal business. Generally, those fields are there. In that, but also the account object, right? What are the things in the account that are interesting? Like, is it small business, large business? However the account gets segmented. What industry or vertical is that account in? Those are important dimensions. But all this data, and this is what the beauty is, it's all in Salesforce, and it's getting more and more accurate as there's more and more adoption of it. So I just want to give you a customer story of EDB. Nadini does the same thing as what I did at Citrix. She runs her sales team on productivity. It's the only way she now measures the performance. And they've got 90 salespeople worldwide. They're growing very fast. It's Postgres software. Pretty amazing stuff. She had 2 salespeople, two analysts like I had at Citrix, calculating all this productivity data. And it's a very manual process. You've seen all those data points that you've got to put in, and then you've got salespeople that come and go. So you've got a salesperson that's left, and then a salesperson that comes in. Now you've got to factor in these changes. But now multiply this out, right? It's fine if you've got 10 salespeople and there's only one person going a quarter. But when you've got 30, 40 salespeople, and there's constantly people coming in and out, you can see how this data starts to become a problem when you're trying to manage this in spreadsheets. Because you've got to pull it out of Salesforce, put it into the spreadsheets to do all the modeling, to then give you your productivity data. And then you got things like, oh, this person's moved from the SMB team to the mid-market team. I know this enterprise rep, this has become a manager now. Now, actually, this enterprise rep is going to be the manager and also sell. You got all this stuff that happens within the sales organization, and all that data, all those changes impacts the calculation of sales productivity. So yeah, I mean, I won't read the slide, but there's an example of a high growth SaaS business that is growing fast, again, by being very methodical about how they run their sales team by productivity. The interesting thing with EDB, then it's not just for the RevOps team that are doing this. They take this data and they send this to the board every quarter now. And not only that, they send the ROI data as well. So the boards are starting to ask for this information. They're trying to ask, what's the productivity of the sales team? Okay, so why is it difficult? Why is it so hard to calculate? 5 minutes, okay. So we've got the simple version, which, like I was saying at the start, you just take how many salespeople do I have today, what's the revenue, and then divide one by the other. I should have said it the other way around. So revenue divided by salespeople gives me my productivity. So I can see if I've got 100,000 that I close, I divide it by 10, well then I've got a productivity of 10,000 per person. Make sense? Okay, so now that's easy to do, but as I explained earlier, you've got all these things that are happening in the background with the data. First of all, we need to look at what's the real-time revenue achieved. I don't want to pull a spreadsheet of what the bookings was, and then I'm already a day behind or whatever it is. But also that revenue across the dimensions. Was that revenue new business? Was it renewal business? Was it upsell revenue? Was it in this vertical? Was it in this line? You need to know that. The other thing is, a sales rep, a whole sales rep might not be focused on sales 100% of the time. Most organizations, they have salespeople that 80% of the time on sales, 20% will be doing something else for three or four of them, or maybe just 2 of them. But you need to factor that in, because if I don't do this by FTE, I would have taken 4 salespeople in this example instead of 3.4, which means I would have got a different productivity number. So it's really important to understand my FTEs of the sales team, not just the sales whole head. And also I need to know how many salespeople were able to sell in that period. I might have 10 salespeople, but 1 was on maternity leave. So they weren't there. So I actually had 9 that could sell in that period I was looking at. And actually of those 9, only 8 of them can sell the product because the other one's still going through onboarding for product A. So I need to know those details because that impacts the calculation of productivity. Period of time, and then by dimension, we've already spoken by dimension. So you can see the complexity of what now happens, and hence why this is all being pulled out into spreadsheets, figuring out, massaging it to understand what's going on, and then to now calculate it, and why so many organizations aren't doing it. Because again, everyone's busy, everyone's got time. The last thing they want to do is go spend days on end trying to figure out this data, and then the beauty is you do it in Excel. I know, I used to do this, and then the next day it's out of date because something's changed. Someone's left, something's gone, and I've got to go back and redo the model. Anyway, okay. So, how to implement? So most common way today, export the relevant data as we've spoken about. We know the limitations. We get all of it. It's inaccurate, it's slow, and out of date. So, how to do it today? Technology, later, that can help do things like this, right? Through the App Exchange, where it's pulling out all this data, looking at we've got algorithms that are looking at all that data to then transform it into the productivity based on what you've seen. And then what's that giving you, right? It's giving you real-time productivity. It's giving you high accuracy of factoring in all the changes of what's happened. Provides the foundation for advanced, performance. And I'll just go to this because we're getting close on time here. This was a research that was done by Forrester. Serious Decisions. I don't know, has anyone worked with Serious Decisions? They're really good analysts. Forrester bought them. But it's called the Sunburst model. And this came out about 2 years ago. And they said, what every organization should be doing is focusing on sales productivity metric as the foundation, as the center. And then everything needs to center around that. Because if I'm not impacting sales productivity in a positive way, we've got to question why we're doing it. But we need to be able to calculate the productivity. So sales planning so productivity impacts sales planning. It impacts compensation design and management. Quotas. If I know my productivity, well then I can set my quotas more accurately. Reporting analysis, which we've spoken about. Process design and management. Sales technology, right? If we put in SalesLoft or I like sales off, or any technology, right? Did we see an increase in productivity? No one knows, right? If you're not looking at your productivity in real time, how do we know that these new technologies actually improve the sales organization? And that sort of informs that revenue engine alignment and so forth with finance and so forth. So really, it should be the center of everything. So you all know Salesforce well. So I won't spend too much time on that. But really, I do think it's important, especially for you Salesforce admins and architects, to make sure your dimension data is updated as accurately as it can be. Start with the sales productivity metric and build from that, because it really is key to everything as I've been showing you today. And the closer you can get that to real time, the better. If you do want it to be real time, let me know. but if you want to and make your lives easier, so then and it gets increasingly complex, of course, as the larger the bigger the sales teams get. Okay, so who won the sales contest? Any guesses from the start? Dwight always wins. Great. Well, thanks everyone. And I'll open it up to questions.
So I think, so a lot of times you hear, okay, we have this giant spreadsheet that we use for our, revenue tracking, and we take a whole day to update it every week. I mean, and they want you to replicate that in Salesforce, or I guess with your tool. What do you say? Do you say yes, we can replicate that? Or do you say well, we can help you with that, but it's not going to be exactly the same with your tool?
Yeah, it's interesting because selling against spreadsheets is like a formidable competitor. I mean, I know I love my spreadsheets. I did 20 years. I had models. I mean, you talk to any RevOps lead or finance or ops. I mean, it just grows. It just comes with them everywhere they go, right? And I think one of the biggest issues, right? It's so flexible, but that creates all the inaccuracies. And my question is always good. You're on version 35 of your spreadsheet. Great. What happened in version 32? No one knows. Mm-hmm. What happened in version 20? I kept some notes, but I don't. No one knows. It's just this, and so I think there's good best practices of what can be implemented. Like going, okay, great. Well, let's calculate your productivity, and then we'll give you the productivity data at least, and then you can start to use that to model and inform your models that you've got. So I think you start somewhere. But yes, and then of course there's technology like ours. You could plug in and does all this for them and into far more granular detail to do your capacity plans. Are we going to replicate everything that an Excel model could do? No, but can we set the guardrails on how it should be done to get you to a point where you can actually just make decisions instead of having to do all this crunching or you being asked to try replicate this in Salesforce, mm-hmm. which is I mean sometimes unrealistic as well. Mm-hmm. So but it is it's not an easy answer because it's difficult to solve because people love their spreadsheets, they're going to stay in them. The execs love it as well, and it's easy to manipulate. And that's one of the dangers as well. We manipulate the data. We manipulate the capacity plans to make it look what it needs to be to fit a certain number. When in reality, that's not what gets produced by the sales organization. Right. So that's my advice to be say, hey, let's calculate the productivity number first, and let's start there, and then the rest can come from that. So you just start, with one step.
Okay.
Okay.
You can keep asking questions and talking back here, but we need to get the next group.
No worries. Okay. Well, thanks very much, everyone.